Hi there, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, I had a discussion with Craig Dowden. Craig is a keynote speaker, he's a business coach, and he's author of international bestseller, Do Good to Lead Well. He's also a regular contributor to a variety of different magazines, including Forbes, Financial Post, and many others. Now, we had a discussion around the challenges that business leadership is facing now, and they've been dealing with them during disruption, and what lies ahead in the next 6 months or what next year. And I think you're really gonna enjoy my discussion with them when he talks about the 6 important pillars that makes up great business leaders. And we also talk about from his research that what has changed, the order change. And one thing he mentioned that empathy got a lot more important during this disruption than it was before. We also talk about his new book coming up, The Time to Lead as well. Stay tuned for further information on that. And check out Craig's website for if you want to find out when the book's going to be released. But if you're finding a value in this discussion, don't forget to send us your feedback, like and subscribe to this channel. Until next time, enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is Craig Dowden. Craig, the topic we have in front of us today is leadership. A lot of what we've gone through recent disruption. This is one of those areas where a lot of people got challenged. A lot of changes has come to the market, economically or health-wise or financially. Just walk us through, where you see the big changes in the market for the last couple of years, Craig.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for the invitation to join you, Gurmeet, and have a discussion on this all-important topic, which is leadership. I would say, and you framed it beautifully, is that disruption is the word of the day. It has been incredibly challenging. And what I would say, a summary statement would be, we are now, as individuals as well as business leaders, facing challenges that a couple of years ago, we wouldn't even in our wildest dreams would have imagined them coming to fruition. Mm-hmm. And so I think now what's happening in leadership is now we're being asked and demanded in a lot of ways in terms of having a perspective on things, broadening our scope of responsibility. I've had lots of conversations in the different forums that I facilitate where people are saying there's never been a more complex time in our history than right now to be a leader, because there's just so many things happening to us in terms of COVID, supply chain disruption, social justice issues, ESG concerns. There are so many pieces and so many factors that are coming across leaders' desks and things that they've never encountered before. So now we've got to figure out, okay, so what's our place in this? And not only for ourselves, we're also responsible for our organizations and our team members. Yeah. So just so much happening these days.
I mean, definitely, it's not only the leaders going to help people in a company, but, they got to be in the right place to help other people, right? So if they're struggling with the same challenges that people are struggling with, right? So health challenges, financial challenges, or it could be, many family challenges, right? So they got to deal with their own challenges before they go out and start helping the teams.
Absolutely. Well, it's that the classic airplane truism, right? Put on your own mask before you assist other passengers. Yeah. And if we are not in the business of self-care, if we aren't figuring out some of the challenges that we're facing and how we're feeling and how we're thinking in each moment, well, then that really compromises our ability to be at our best to support others. And you're absolutely bang on. And I think what's really been interesting, great leadership starts with great self-leadership. And so when we are struggling in that domain, well, it's really challenging for us to be able to be the best that we can be for those that care, who we care about most. And you touched on it so rightly as well, Gurmeet, in terms of not just our teams in our organizations, our families, our friends, our communities. So we're all impacted by this.
Very interesting. So let's talk about your book, Do Good to Lead Well. You mentioned characteristics that the leaders need to have in order to be very effective leaders. Before COVID or after COVID, if you walk us through what are some of those characteristics that leaders must have in order to lead, and do some of those change during the COVID? Like I said, do some of them get more important than they were not very important before?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I've been really privileged throughout. So in the earliest stages of COVID-19, I launched a continuation of the Do Good to Lead Well webinar series. And so I've interviewed over 70 CEOs, best-selling authors, TED speakers, and I asked them that question. So what does leadership look like? And what are those key qualities? And what I hear time and time again is that the fundamentals of extraordinary leadership have not changed. It's all around amplification. And so in Do Good to Lead Well, what I wanted to do in that book was essentially build a business case, an evidence-based business case for what are the 6 pillars of positive leadership. So as an example, self-awareness was the opening chapter in the book. Well, there's been decades of research showing that self-awareness is a critical leadership attribute. Well, during COVID, we've just talked about it. That became absolutely, you could not get anywhere without it. Empathy is another example, as the closing chapter in the book. And so, one of the things that came out time and time again, you look at the top articles in Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Fast Company, Entrepreneur, Fortune, everybody talking about the importance of empathy and understanding the needs of our team members, our stakeholders, our customers, our board members. So that once again became amplified as we went through the pandemic. And last but not least, another quality that was covered in the book is humility. And if you want to have a masterclass in the importance of leaving our ego at the door, it's COVID, because there was no guidebook we could go to. Well, how do you lead during a global pandemic? And the speed of change was so fast pre-COVID. Then when COVID came, it just completely disrupted everything. And now we have to look at our scenarios. We might have ideas about how to face a particular situation. We needed to be ready to pivot on a dime. And so much has been written around those organizations that more successfully adapted were those that were quicker to throw out their old assumptions or business models and move down a different path. So I think really what's happened is that those core intangible qualities of leadership that have been building momentum for quite some time now just became amplified. And as we turn the corner around this, they're going to be more, not less important.
And as you mentioned that some of those the principles the leaders been practicing, they've been a little bit more successful. One part is they were doing some of that stuff and they become more successful. But also when you're going through a disruption, how do you keep focus on those things? It's very easy to lose focus. You go through one event, either a little bit of success or failure, they're both critically important. You gain a little bit of success on that, and then you can lose easily focus, or you have a little bit of setback and you lose a focus, right? So how do you still stay on top of those things, even though when you're going through disruption, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. Our successes are valuable because we learn a lot from them. And I love, Gurmeet, that you mentioned that our failures, our setbacks are valuable because we learn from them as well.
Both of them.
And then what's critical is both of them are learning opportunities. So back to ego, we can get overly enamored with our own successes and think, oh, I've got all this figured out. And we don't continue in that vein of curiosity. And then same thing with our setbacks. We can get overwhelmed from an emotional standpoint or get highly self-critical. And then that's not helpful either, because, hey, you know what? Especially when we're going through a new situation, of course, we're not going to do everything perfectly. And now what we want to do is say, okay, what do we learn from that? What do we take from that? What do we want to carry forward through this process, as well as what do we need to change through this process? And what's really interesting as well, you could even make that argument about the global pandemic. A lot of CEOs and business leaders I speak with, they're saying to me, hey, and these are conversations that I have in my coaching practice where they're saying, well, what are some of the lessons learned through this pandemic? And what have we discovered about ourselves or our organizations? One of the key revelations has been, boy, we can do things much faster than we thought. I remember chatting with numerous, and I continue to, CEOs saying, wow, we had this 5-year turnaround or transition that we did in 5 weeks. So what do we need to do to keep that going as we move forward? And then there are certain things that pre-pandemic we want to leave in the past. So COVID, so multiple people have talked about, well, I got to spend more time with my family, my friends, my children. And I'm not going to give that up as we move through it. So I'm going to be more strategic about when I go to a business meeting in person versus when we do what we're doing right now. It's have a meeting through Zoom. So I think this is where we can really start to enhance the quality of our decision-making, both with our successes as well as our setbacks as leaders.
But is that creating a challenges for leaders now? Yeah, we've gone through a couple of years of disruption now. A lot of leaders are, bringing people back in offices, but, people pushing back. A couple of leaders I talked to, people don't want to come back to offices because they got so comfortable, working from home. And I think a lot of leaders will agree that productivity actually went up when people were working from home because they were working at different hours. But from a leadership standpoint, Craig, managing people in a one building is a different skill set. But if you have to manage people in a remote location, or they, some in an office, some in a remote location, or they certain days in an office, does that create a challenge for leaders? How to motivate people, how to build a culture, and how to build a team spirit, and how to keep their productivity high?
Absolutely. Well, and to build on your point, I've had countless conversations where very senior executives would speak with me and say, "Oh, you know what? I thought Craig would flourish, during this pandemic. He, but pre-pandemic was just a rock star moving through, and then really, had some profound challenges. And Gurmeet, who I wasn't really sure about, just was a rock star during this time." So what's really interesting is how we adapt to our environment, to our situation. And I think what's really interesting, a couple of key pieces. Number one, and I'll admit my bias, because I just talked about empathy and that it's in, that I wrote about it and I speak about it all the time. Yet this is also what's critical, right? Is now, especially when we're in a remote environment, we're no longer face to face. So a lot of the cues that we rely on in the office being co-located, well, if I walk by and I can sense your energy or I can see how you're behaving, well, now that gives me information, right? Now I can have a better sense of what's going on. When you're at home and you're on a laptop, well, how, and especially camera off and all these other things, I don't have the same line of sight. So once again, it puts a real emphasis on being empathetic, asking questions, being curious. And I think the other piece, which has really come through, which is a fascinating challenge for many, could argue most organizations, our whole idea of productivity and performance was really nebulous. Like no one really understood what was being, if people were in their chairs, okay, I can see you and I'll make the operating assumption you're doing stuff.
Yeah.
Now, when we're at home, there's this whole, for a lot of leaders, it's okay, I can't see my team, I'm getting nervous. And so the challenge has been, and you nailed it, which is, okay, if I'm going to come back to the office, why? Like, what is the reason for me to do that?
Yeah.
And if the answer is, well, just so I can watch you behind your desk, that isn't a particularly satisfying answer for people, right? Because, hey, if I'm delivering what you need and I don't need,
what do you need me?
and all that kind of stuff, and I'm just as productive, if not more, at home, why? So I think what COVID has done has really forced the door open on a lot of important conversations that before we had the pleasure of not having, or we weren't forced into having them. So I think what it's doing is being a much more mindful, I guess, philosophy around organizations. One final point that I'd make as well, the push on not returning to the office, I think, is really, we have to think about psychologically. So my background is in psychology, and a lot of autonomy, our ability to exact influence on our environment, is a core human need. Well, what has COVID done? Basically, all the things that before we often took for granted, I could go to the grocery store, I could go to the restaurant, go to the movies, go on vacation, whatever it is. COVID just took everything away, and I was essentially told to stay home. And this was all beyond my control. So now our desire, our ability to enact control over our environment has been taken away. So now when people are saying, come back to the office, you can understand the reflex of, whoa, this is I'm in an environment now that I can control. That's a very powerful need. So being aware of that and how that operates psychologically is very important.
Yeah, it made it changed a few things. If I'm an employee, Greg, and let's say, I started working from home, If you look at it financially, I just got a 10,000, 15,000 raise by sitting home because I don't have to drive. I don't have to worry about that wasting time. I got a lot of time back. Plus my travel expenses, all that got raised, right? And now after a couple of years, we're telling people, no, you got to come back again. So nobody's willing to take the leap again. And I'm saying, listen, maybe I got to look for other options that, and find an employer who can let me stay home. So I'm seeing that because I'm interviewing a lot of people on an ongoing basis. So I'm seeing that the first question they ask is, hey, is it a remote position or is it an in-office position? They want to know that before we even go through the interview process.
You're absolutely right. And again, you can understand and appreciate that from people's perspective, because as you say, I get a raise by being home, and that's financial. And then also I get a whole bunch of time back. Well, that's awesome. I also have an opportunity to enrich my relationships. I also have an opportunity to have more effective work-life integration, because now I can pivot depending on what I need to do. So if I want to go work out in the middle of the day and I have an hour, well, now it's a lot easier for me to do that. And then I'll put in an hour at night, right? When I maybe, my partner's out doing something or my kids are asleep or whatever. So now I have much more control. So there are so many more benefits to that. And you're also absolutely correct in terms of now people are asking, so is this a remote position? Is this a hybrid position? Is this an in-office position? And I think fundamentally we are meaning making creatures. So we just want to understand why. So it's just like being a kid and, saying, hey, well, come back to the office. Why? Well, because I told you to.
Yeah.
That's challenging. Like, you can understand it. You can say, hey, well, this is my business, and that's absolutely fine. Then if we put on our empathy hat and think about, okay, how would I feel if I was just told to come back without reason, just because I told you so? That is going to create a bit of a challenge, because we can lose confidence in the leader, in the person, right? Because we're saying, okay, well, it doesn't sound like there's a legitimate reason. And then I'm just going to assume you don't trust me to do my work, which now we're starting to really chip away at the quality of our relationship.
Very interesting. I want to touch back the point you mentioned earlier on, Craig. I think that's very important, that the way we measure productivity before was, somebody sitting in a chair for 8 hours, we counted by time clock, either by time clock or by somebody's, coming in the morning and leaving. People working from home, you don't have that option anymore to do that. So do companies have to find a new way of measuring productivity? Is it by task now? Hey, listen, I'm giving you 20 tasks, you should be completing that in a day. I'm going to measure you based on the tasks you completed. So which means we have to figure out new systems, new way of doing things, and in many different new systems where I can measure productivity or your work instead of measuring a time or you counting hours or days. Is that a big change happening in the market? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I certainly would say that. And some companies were really wrestling with this, because this is one of those big, hairy problems, right? That it's really tough to wrestle to the ground. You're almost wrestling an alligator to the ground kind of thing. Yeah. And so that it really becomes difficult to parse that out. And then so one of the simplest ways to measure it was, were you at your desk? Yeah, because I can see you there. And whether or not you were playing Candy Crush on Facebook or whatever it was, I could observe you. So then I had this false sense of control over, okay, well, if I'm able to peer over your shoulder, you can do things. Now I think it is putting some organizations in an uncomfortable position about, okay, how do we measure performance? How do we manage performance? What does productivity look like? So now a great question becomes, well, Gurmeet, if you assign me a role and I'm able to deliver to you what you need from me, what your expectations are in 4 hours versus 8, do I not now benefit from those additional 4 hours? Are they not mine to use? Are you paying for my time, or are you paying for my output? And I think and this is an interesting discussion I've had as well, right? Where people, and this is especially for sometimes in high potential cases, right? Hey, if I can push things out a lot faster now, well, great. Now I have more time. So then now I have one of two choices. I either get more time for me, and so I can be as efficient or effective as possible, or I can take on more in my role. And now that means because I'm taking on expanded responsibilities, I have an opportunity to make more because I'm driving more value to the business. And so now this is one of those, again, really kind of ambiguous. Let's start to roll this out and put some more guideposts in place. It can be challenging for business leaders to start to think about that.
But what recent, the last couple of years, what it did is open up those conversations, right? There's so many different conversations open. We don't know what's going to come out of it, but definitely there's opportunities, and the conversations has to happen, and definitely discussion has to happen. And we collectively, we got to figure out what's a fair for both parties, like, for employees and employers, and go forward with those approaches, right?
Absolutely. And I think, and what I love about what you're sharing is it's a springboard for conversation. So COVID, I've said, COVID's almost like the ultimate pause button. So it just put everything on pause, and people were forced into some self-reflection that for many, we're so busy doing all kinds of stuff. We were in kind of coasting mode and just doing stuff and we could be highly productive. We're just maybe habitual mode is a better way of describing it, where we had a schedule every day. We just kept going out and doing stuff. And now with COVID, it was, okay, so what am I doing now? And why am I doing it? And how am I doing it? And what does that mean? And I think this is where you see conversations about the Great Resignation, especially in the US. And you see that's infiltrated the CEO, the chief executive ranks as well. And you also see it in terms of, okay, so now we are in a position where we are having conversations that we may not have had before. And I would suggest they were very important conversations that we were just able to put to the side because there was nothing there that really prompted us to sit down and say, hey, Gurmeet, so what does performance mean? What does productivity mean? Like, what is a reasonable output? What does value to the business look like, or to the organization? And so it's just easier to keep doing what we're doing. So I think, once again, back to empathy, this is where, and self-awareness, it's really critical for us, because I need to understand what my biases are, my philosophies are, what my values are. Maybe for me, I find it really tough to accept people working from home. Right. And so then because I can't work from home, I find it challenging. So then I make the assumption that everyone else is like me. And so they all got to be in the office, or else they would not be doing the same level of work and that I would be doing, because I know I would struggle. That's a false assumption here. And same thing with empathy. Where are you? What do you need? What's your home situation like? What are the different challenges that you're navigating? What are the different realities that you're working through right now? They're all super important. And also not making the assumption that just because two of your team members have 2 kids and a dog, that they have the exact same home life. And a lot of times we make that mistake as well, that, oh, well, these 2 individuals need to be managed the exact same way. Not necessarily. It's possible, yet it's also very likely that they have different concerns.
Yeah, definitely. We make those assumptions all the time, just because, they come across the same way and easier. And to make for us to make a decision is, we, they're both the same way. So let's just, it's more of a mathematical decision than a human decision at their side, right?
Absolutely. And human beings are really good at just creating categories, right? It's just jumping to, okay, well, we see X and now that means Y. And unfortunately, and let's go back to the opening of our discussion, which is, has there ever been a more complex time to lead? So once everybody's in the office and they're co-located, again, I have a line of sight on everybody, a physical line of sight. So I can walk by desks, I can see what's going on, I can pick up on energy in different pieces. Now people are dispersed, or certainly during the pandemic and earliest stages of it, they're at home. Now I'm being tasked with, so what's going on in Gurmeet's world, in Craig's world, in Sally's world, in Sarah's world? Okay, now it requires much more level of engagement, interest, time, understanding, and that adds additional energy for a leader.
Yeah. The business leader are watching, I'm sure there's a lot of responsibilities leaders, put up recently, what we just talking about, it is, caring about people is a hard work. You have to put a lot of time and energy into it. You have to understand what people are going through, build those human connection. Same time, the leaders have a pressure. They gotta scale up the companies again. They gotta get back to the revenue levels again, right? And a lot of them is gonna struggle, because you gotta find a balance between those two. And I think that's why it does a little bit of personal toll on our leaders, because they have a responsibility both sides. So what do you see, Craig? How does leaders find the balance? They have to sharpen their skill set, they have to build new skill set, or simply spending time on themselves and keep grounding themselves. Where do you see that how do they approach some of those challenges?
Yeah, and it's such an important question. And to build on your observation as well, one of my favorite studies that came out shows that empathy is hard work. Empathy it requires more energy and effort, and it's draining, because I'm taking an active interest in your situation, what's going on. That's what leads to it being a rare leadership quality, right, in practice, because it saps my reserves. And so that's important, because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Yet the upside of empathy is incredibly profound. There's so much evidence that shows that empathy drives higher bottom line performance, creativity, and all these other things. So that is, and there's the challenge, right? It's valuable, and it requires time, and it requires energy. And I think for leaders, what's interesting sometimes, and we dichotomize. So we say, I can drive business success, or I can care about my people.
Yeah.
And then, like, when I care about my people, my business has to go in the tank. And then when I care about my business, my people, and that's an oversimplification. That is the road to a really challenging reality. So two, I've had the privilege to speak with, as I've said, so many amazing chief executives and thought leaders. I remember speaking with Doug Conan. So he's the former CEO of Campbell's.
Yeah.
And he engineered one of the greatest engagement turnarounds in the history of Gallup. And when I was speaking with him, and I'm going to paraphrase this quote, he said, Craig, I'm tough on standards and I'm soft on people. And I love that, right? Because what it does is remove the or. It's not an either or, it's an and. And now the question for me as a leader is, well, how can I be tough on standards and soft on my people, so I don't have to rip somebody to pieces if we are underperforming? So how do I ensure that the performance is still there, and I maintain the sacredness of the individual, and I respect them, and I ensure that they are whole and they are fully engaged? Because if not, there's going to be a challenge. And then another CEO, former CEO, I interviewed, Gerard Schmidt. He's the former CEO of Diebold Nixdorf, the largest ATM manufacturer in the world, employees in 60 countries. I love how he framed it, because he essentially said, we have to lead with our mind and our hearts, always. And now the trick as a leader is figuring out, okay, when do I over-index on my heart, leading with heart, and when do I over-index leading with mind? And the important thing is to remember they're not gone. It's not 100-0.
Yeah.
And now what we need to do is ensure that we are just adjusting, right, the barometer, if you will, so that now, and then applying it appropriately in the situation. Because if my people are exhausted and they've just been through so much turmoil and disruption, me trying to drive them into results, well, I might get a little blip, yet long term, I'm just going to burn them out. So I've got to balance that. So rather than developing new skills, I would say it really requires us to raise our game as leaders and be more complex and use much more advanced decision-making, much more advanced kind of understanding of situations.
Wow, that's very powerful. Both standard and soft on the people, and also looking from heart and mind. Very, very powerful concept. And I think that they hit home that definitely you gotta be mindful of both sides of those things.
Absolutely, you can't. And once because it also can rationalize us to do some really terrible things, right? Because I've got to make sure my business survives. Well, and then to treat people as if they don't matter, I don't care, and I just keep driving them into the ground. How's my business going to survive?
Yeah.
because it might be for a month, a couple of months, whatever. But what are the long-term implications? Or even if I get through it, and even if we hit, how much better could we be if I had a fully engaged, committed workforce? My high potentials are going to leave. Others are going to leave the first chance that they get. And same thing on the opposite side. So just not to, because I find too, we tend to we'll talk a lot about drive the business results at the expense of the people, which is really, really important. And then I would also flip on the other side. We also have business realities. So then if I am overly indexed on people and where we are, and just eliminating the business realities of it, well, now this also sets up a challenging piece because my organization may not survive. Now, once again, it doesn't mean that, okay, I don't care anymore. Now I need to say, okay, what kind of conversations do I need to have? So I've worked with executives where it's bring the team together and say, hey, I appreciate we've been through a lot and we're all exhausted. And we have even more challenges on the horizon. Our supply chain has been disrupted beyond what we ever could have imagined. And so I know we're all burning the candle on both ends. And here's where we are financially right now. We've got about 6 months runway before we're really like outside of that. It's really unknown. So I'm not saying this I'm sharing this so let's figure this out. We need to come together and say, how can we start to, because ultimately we all want to be here in month 7, 8, 9, and want to, once this moves through, and this is our reality. So what do you think? How do we bring people in? And same thing, you get the senior leadership team talking and say, all right, now let's go to our teams. And we know our teams are running on fumes. Let's engage them. Hey, Craig, what can you do? What do you think? Where are you in your energy? Like, do you need time off? If so, what are we going to have to do here? All those things are essential conversations, and we need to have them on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting. We talk about a lot of skill set that leaders need, Craig. Some of them very, very important, skill set we've gone through. But there's other skill set that you gotta transfer that mindset to your leadership team as well. Not only you gotta do it, but you gotta train them, the next the line leaders for the same mindset and the same kind of skill set, empathy, attitude, all those, caring more people. How big a job is that for leaders, especially what we're going through for the last couple of years? Is that creating a challenge for leaders? They can practice. We all work hard. The leaders, they know how to. They've been doing it for a long time. They know how to get a handle on some of the stuff. But now you got to train your people and bring them on the same level as you are, so you can effectively move the company forward. Does that create a different challenges for what we just gone through?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly the business owner, the CEO, and there's lots of research around this, has a disproportionate impact on the culture of the organization, because basically people look up to see, well, how am I supposed to behave around here? At the same time, and your question is very well founded, Gurmeet, in terms of, okay, so now how do I have this trickle down throughout the organization? And that's critical. And so that can be tough. And then also, here's the other piece. Sometimes executives, business owners, senior leaders can jump in when people are struggling or take stuff on themselves. Yeah. So I think that there's a couple of really key pieces. Number one is to reward, recognize, acknowledge, call out examples of positive leadership within your senior leadership team. And so you recognize and you go out of your way to say, this is exactly the type of leadership that I want all of us around this table to exemplify. And equally as important, flipping it around, is calling out when behaviors do not meet that standard immediately. Hey, either going one-on-one or calling it out in the moment and saying, look, this is Craig, when you went into that meeting and you tore a strip off of one of your team, that's just, walk me through that, help me. And what impact do you think that had? And that doesn't match with our values. And that's, how do you think this person is? And take coaching moments and take those opportunities to walk people through, develop them in terms of their own self-insight. And once again, it's really around modeling and then taking advantage of coaching opportunities so that we can instill that, and rewarding, highlighting those behaviors. and reinforcing them so people go, oh, okay, this is what's going to get Gurmeet's attention. And this is not, this is going to get me in trouble. So it's a great, powerful way to move it through the organization.
Very interesting. A lot of work for leaders. The work is cut out. Definitely. I think going forward next couple of years, definitely there's so many challenges that they have to navigate the water and figure out and solve a lot of problems. I think that's one of the reasons we started this channel is simply, hey, I'm solving a problem this way. Maybe let me share my thoughts on that. Maybe somebody else can benefit from it. Or somebody else solve the problem. Let me tap into that. Maybe I can it can help me with some of those challenges, because there's so many challenges as we just talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, and I'm a positive psychologist by training, so I look at things as the glass half full for sure. And there's lots of powerful research around the benefits of taking a more positive orientation on situations. And to me, when I look at it, I say, absolutely, there's endless challenges. And simultaneously, what an awesome time to lead. Like if we ever wanted to have an opportunity to test the upper limits of our potential, this is it. So despite the complexity and the volume of challenges, the rewards that come with that, to say, hey, I'm figuring this out and I'm navigating through this time, that's pretty powerful, both personally as well as from a meaning generation standpoint. I feel great about the impact that I'm having on myself, on my team, on my community. And also there's lots of evidence that shows from a business impact, these things are invaluable. And so as we continue to navigate and move through the pandemic and get into the next chapter of our work history, this is going to be crucial. And that's what's going to separate the organizations that thrive from those that really struggle.
Yeah. If you look at that, some of the companies that are very, very well during the last, disruption of COVID time, if you just look at the leaders, what they've been doing, I studied a couple of them, but if you look at those leaders, how they've been leading, what decisions they've been making, that explains very much that, these leaders that made those decisions to put those companies in a situation where it's time to, reap some of those rewards that what they've been working hard on for the last few years.
Absolutely. And you read success stories of companies that have been in one particular market, served one particular niche. Even on the manufacturing side, you choose whatever vertical you wish. And then they realized, hey, this is not sustainable. I need to pivot. So now we're going to, manufacture PPE or other things, right? And then just kind of open up a whole other product line, or, hey, we can modify this and do something else. So that's awesome. And also I had the privilege of speaking with Francesca Gino out of Harvard Business School, and she shared some research that she did. And I think it's incredibly instructive for us and your viewers as well, because those managers, leaders, executives that basically held the mindset of, I can't wait to get back to the way things were, or let's just hold on and just power through this because we're eventually going to get there. They really struggled with resiliency, with performance, because again, they were holding on to a frame that just wasn't, it was quickly evaporating. Those leaders that were like, okay, we're here and it may be challenging, and that's the way it is, so let's figure this out. And so they were more in the moment and looking into the future, so more future focused, which makes us more agile. Because if I'm just holding on tight and saying, all right, just gotta wait for this to pass, well, I'm still holding on to those frames, and they're not going to work. Someone waiting for that supply chain to open up magically, right? And then if they haven't made adjustments, well, if their supply chain doesn't recover, that's it. That's really, really tough. So we got to start to think about, well, what are we going to do differently?
Very interesting. And during this time, you've been busy working on another book, Craig. I want to talk about it, The Time to Lead. So if you'd walk us through, what can we look forward to, and what is this book about, Craig?
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, I decided to take some time during the pandemic and write my next book, and it really was about self-leadership. So my time to do good to lead well was very much around I say, 75% of it was around, well, how do you lead others? What are some key strategies for you as a leader? And then a time to lead is almost 75% self-leadership. So what do we need to, what are the key attributes? What are key qualities that we need to possess? And because of, and COVID really inspired me in that way, was that, okay, fundamentally, we must lead ourselves first. And so talking about things like mastering our mindset, mastering our emotions, mastering our resiliency, mastering authentic leadership, all critical things that have emerged and really were amplified during this time, so that we can be better prepared and better understand who we are, what makes us tick, and how we need to show up so we have the impact that we want to have.
Wow, those some of those items you mentioned, mindset is one of the critical one. I struggle with that definitely. People around me, we hire ongoing basis. What we look for is a mindset. That's a critical piece. What we look for, but that's hard to build. Craig, these items you just mentioned, that self leadership. This is a lot of discipline, a lot of structure, a lot of hard work on yourself. Where you see people getting stuck when it comes to putting that much work on yourself?
Yeah, I think we tend to be, we like habit. We like things the way things are. We can have the self-serving bias, right? See ourselves in the most positive light. And it takes time and energy. And it's uncomfortable coming back to humility, to think, maybe I'm not doing this the best way that I could. And so that can get in the way of us getting to the next level. And I think it's like any, and what I love about these qualities, we can develop them. And what's critical is, it's just like going to the gym. If I want to enhance my cardio fitness or my lean muscle mass, what do I need to do? I got to get to the gym and I got to do the reps. And sometimes I may not feel like it. Yeah. And I got to get there, because that's going to be the key. And it's the same thing here. And what's awesome is, the more time we spend doing it, the easier it is, and the better the results that we get from it. And it's really natural. So as a quick example around mindset, do I look at things as being an endless problem or a boundless opportunity? I'm in the same situation. So just like COVID, is COVID just, we're never going to get out of here. And so that's it. Look, our customer base is completely, we don't have our supply chain. What are we, versus going, okay, so now with that reality, how can we serve our customers in a different way? Yes. Same situation, totally different mindset, very different frame of opportunities that open up. So all of these things are completely within our control. And then for us, it's okay, do I want to put in the work and take the time to be more aware so that I can be motivated and drive my competency in these different areas?
It's my personal experience. I'm not sure if somebody shares that with me as well, like Craig or not. When I started building a business, I was always, I'm talking about 2010, 2011, when I started a company, and I was getting struck with some of my own limitation. But as I grew in a business, as a business owner, as well as a little bit of leadership, what I learned is, more time I put into these qualities, more time I put in, it doesn't have a direct outcome, but my business grows automatically for somehow, if for somehow there's a relation to it, more time I put into myself, understand myself a little bit, better mindset, better, empathy, the business grows automatically. So there's a correlation between those two. We cannot directly relate to it, but say there's some sort of correlation that more time I put into this, more benefit. Especially with the COVID, happened to have a lot of time on myself that, I could read more books. I started this channel where I was going through a lot of books, reading, understanding, talking to a lot of leaders. I was building those skill set that I wanted to spend a little bit more time on. And we saw a lot of growth in the business during the COVID. So I think there's some sort of relation between those two, that more time you put on yourself, that you have a business growth on the other side.
You're absolutely right. And one of my favorite studies on this, it was over 500,000 people. And it was Travis Bradbury that led the research, and they wanted to look at, okay, so what drives success personally and professionally? They had 16 different personality types, because sometimes we think, oh, well, you've got a quote unquote winning personality, or a challenging personality. Looked at demographics, they looked at education, they looked at self-awareness. self-awareness was the only significant predictor of success personally and professionally. Wow. And what's really interesting is 83% of the top performers were high in self-awareness. Only, I think it was 2% of the poorest performers were high in self-awareness. And yet 1 in 3 of us has a high level at maximum. In some studies, it's 1 in 10 have reasonable self-awareness. And when you sit back and think about it, and your example is perfect here, right? The more we're aware of who we are and how we come across to other people, the better equipped we are to make better decisions for us and our company. And so that is where the power, the direct power of self-insight, and which is why I'm so passionate about the science and practice of positive leadership and want to talk about how do we master our mindset? That's crucial to be self-aware. How do we master our emotions? Because being emotionally hijacked is critical in terms of showing up in the most effective way in different situations. And so that is critical. And Korn Ferry, another great study of over 5,000 leadership teams, found the level of self-awareness in collectively in the leadership teams was a significant predictor of bottom line performance. So there's a direct line of sight around that, because once again, we are making much better decisions. We're showing up in a much better way, and we're able to understand what the situation requires and who we are and how we can best adapt to it.
Wow, very interesting. It's like you got to solve problem within you before you can solve problem outside in a business.
Absolutely.
So if you don't solve those problems within you, you can never go and solve other problems.
Yeah, you're so right, because well, if I fly off the handle and I'm emotionally volatile, and if I'm on, and if you're on my team, you're going to go, well, am I going to have confidence and this is who I want to be? And this is, so when Craig comes in and says, hey, maybe we should do that, I'm probably going to, I'm not, how much confidence am I going to have? So if we're not providing a compelling and inspiring role model in terms of our leadership, how do we expect that others are going to follow us just because of our position? They may do it because of that. They're not going to bring their best selves. They're not going to go above and beyond what we ask of them. So we're invariably going to be playing with a lower quality hand as a result of our own challenges of self-leadership.
Very interesting. So let's talk about your background, Craig. How did you get involved in the leadership? And if you talk about a little bit your journey, how do you get involved in this?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Newfoundland originally, and so I have to shout out to Newfoundland, have to do that. Nice. And growing up, I was always fascinated by what makes people tick. So for me, it was I just found people endlessly fascinating. And I was, even my earliest childhood, people would come to me and talk about the challenges they were having with friends or family or their, romantic partners and all that good stuff. So I just thought I just had this innate curiosity and listened a lot and learned a lot. And then when I got to university, and then came across business psychology, industrial organizational psychology, I'm like, okay, people have personalities, businesses have personalities. And when you combine those together, I'm never going to be bored. And fortunately I was right. So it's just from my earliest days, it was something that I just thought was really, really interesting. And the complexity, how two different people can have two totally different views of the same situation. Rather than being frustrated by that, I just thought that was so cool. And I thought, well, how come someone else sees this? It's just like going to a movie. Someone thinks it's Oscar worthy and someone else thinks it's for the trash bin of history. And you say, all right, so we're clearly watching a different movie, even though it's the same one. We're taking things differently. So that's been my motivation and interest.
That is so amazing that two people can watch the same thing and have a totally different experience. We provide a lot of our training for our staff on ongoing basis. They watch the same video, and if you talk to them after that, but what do you take out? What do you think of the video? You got a totally different versions of the stories out of that, and so then you get to talk to them and say, listen, this is what he meant. So 3 people watch a video, same video, training video, they can get a totally different outcome out of the training video.
Absolutely, and that's where. And this is where we can miss opportunities to learn, right? Where So I watch a movie and I think it's Oscar worthy. So then if you watch it and you think it's a trash bin movie, then I judge you and I get all mad and I start saying, well, how could you think that? And it's the best movie that's ever. I'm not listening. I'm yelling at you, or I'm dismissing your opinion and all. So versus, hey, wow, okay, I thought that was a great film. Like, tell me more. What didn't you like about it? What were the pieces? And here's where it gets really interesting, right? Because then I might go, I missed that underlying thread entirely. I was at a surface level and I didn't get that deeper. You know what? When in that light, I can so now my viewpoint modifies on the film, or I can listen to what you shared and maybe again I was on the deeper level story and there were different things happening, and then for you it was like, well, there just enough cars didn't blow up or there weren't enough action scenes. Hey, okay, well, I get it. If that's the type of movie, I wanted a different type. So now I understand. And I don't agree. I still believe it's an Oscar-worthy film, yet I have a deeper understanding. And then, hey, the next time we go to a movie, I might not invite you if there's a certain storyline. And that doesn't mean you're a bad friend or a bad person, just means we're different. And so now we actually have a better appreciation of each other, rather than, again, trying to force our own views on someone else.
Yeah, and you get a common understanding of the film, right? You may not be, your way or other person's way, but at least you get a common understanding. If this person thinks this way, I think it this way, but who knows what it was, but these are two different understanding of the same video.
Exactly. And you could have fun with this and bring it to a business context. We both go in, have a meeting with a key stakeholder, key customer, and maybe there's 3 of us around the table. And then we say, all right, how do you think that went? And someone goes, well, that was the best meeting I've ever been a part of. And I'm like, that's the worst meeting I've been. And someone else is like, well, it was okay. Rather than me, and especially if I'm the leader, go back to my team member and go, how could you think that was the best meeting? That was a complete waste of and that, well, guess what? I'm shutting them down. I'm showing that I'm judging their reaction and I don't believe it's valid and it's not even worth listening to. Well, there's so much I could have learned from that. Because here's the other thing, the other person's going to feel embarrassed. They're going to feel even afraid. And so now, well, why am I going to open up about this? So now, guess what happens? They may keep having the same type of meeting with customers and stakeholders when I'm not there. Yeah. Versus now opening up the pathway for conversation, and I might be able to coach them. Or maybe I've got it totally off in terms of my own. And so once again, being open to different perspectives, learning from them. Well, now I can either coach my team and or realign my own thinking.
Wow, very interesting. Very interesting. It happens all the time, especially in a sales meeting. Yes. You go to a sales meeting, totally different. Oh, this person's going to sign a contract, we're going to move forward. Oh, this person's totally different direction. Very, very often, that it's so true that what you mentioned, that, having the conversation opens up and it prepares you next time what question to ask. Maybe, how do we add value? Maybe different ways of adding value. Totally.
Exactly.
So much to learn from it.
And then you can start to extract themes and patterns. Okay, maybe someone in this segment of my customer base, they're really sensitive towards price, and someone else is really sensitive towards quality or whatever it is. And who knows whatever service product you're offering, yet it again allows us to come in with deeper questions and being more curious and expanding our understanding. And then what's critical for them, especially in a sales context, is feeling understood. So great, now you're asking questions that matter to me, and so now I inherently will trust you more because I get this appreciation that you care. What matters. You care about what matters to me.
Very interesting. Hey, Craig, I learned so much from our discussion. I definitely, my fellow business leaders are watching. I definitely, encourage them to, reach out to you, get a copy of your book, and connect with you for conversation. I learned so much. I'm sure everybody's who, be in touch with you, they're gonna learn so much from you. Any message for business leaders who are trying to get back to the, trying to scale up the companies? Craig, any word of wisdom you want to leave for them?
Yeah, I would say what an amazing time to lead. What an incredible opportunity in front of us, despite the volume of challenges. And the number one piece is that let's not do it alone. A lot of times what we think is that, well, I'm the only one that struggles with this, or I don't want to share my challenges with other people. And in fact, the most successful among us are those that are more open, more vulnerable, more willing to share their challenges with each other. So lean into your network, lean into the resources that you have, be open about what you're struggling with, because I facilitate CEO mastermind groups. Guess what? One person says something and everyone else around the table is like, yeah, I get it, that I have that challenge as well. And yet we can think it's only us. So the more that we can show up and be open. And one final thing I would share with people, because I love this stat as well. When we need help, in 90% of the cases when we get help that we need, we directly ask for it. So in only 10% of the cases that when we get help that we need, it just happens to come across our desk. So a lot of times when we're struggling with, well, should I reach out to Gurmeet and ask him a question, right? Well, remember that stat. 9 times out of 10, what's going to get me the help that I need is asking for it, because people who are willing to help, people love helping. We just need to let them know they need our assistance. And here's the other thing. They're not going to think we are weak or we're, incompetent. They love the opportunity to support us, because we all need help and support from each other. Yeah. So that would be I may have cheated a little bit and expanded it. That would
hey, I usually think of that. Hey, why solve a problem that somebody already solved it? Why don't you reach out and ask, hey, how'd you solve the problem? Walk me through. And if you have a problem, I'll help you solve the problem, right? So it's a give and take, both sides.
You're absolutely right. Well, it's growth mindset, right? Rather than see someone who solved something before as a threat, or, well, I could never be like Gurmeet, go, hey, Gurmeet, that's really cool. You solved that. How'd you do it?
Yeah. Help each other out. Beautiful. Hey, there's so much to learn from you, Craig. I definitely, business leader watching, I definitely encourage that. Reach out to you. I'm going to include links to your website, also to your books as well. And, get a copy of your book and reach out to you for conversation. I learned so much. Very grateful for spending time with me, especially on a Saturday morning, Craig.
Oh, you're most welcome, Gurmeet. Appreciate the invitation. Love how you've channeled and taken the opportunity, during COVID to say, okay, so what do I need to do? How can I give back? How can I contribute to not only my own growth, to the growth in my community and support people? Again, I think it's a wonderful way of framing, a great exercise of saying, all right, so what can I do in this situation? So the pleasure's been mine. Love your energy. Love the topics we've discussed. So it was an absolute pleasure. Happy to connect with anyone. Where
can people find you, Craig? What is the best way to connect with you?
I would say my website, craigdowden.com. Reach out on LinkedIn. I will, and say Gurmeet sent you. I'd love to connect.
Thank you.
And then on Twitter at Craig Dowden. And as I shared, I'm from Newfoundland, so I love to turn social media into a Newfoundland kitchen party. So the more the merrier. Come on down.
Nice. So the book, the first one, Lead to, the first one is already on your website, right, Craig?
Yes, Do Good to Lead Well is on the website. And then A Time to Lead is coming out in mid-September. So it's available on Amazon. You can pre-order it there now and happy. And there'll be some launch events coming up and things. So feel free to reach out if you're interested and be a part of this leadership conversation and community.
Yeah, beautiful. When the new book comes out, definitely we're going to talk about the book again, Craig. But I love the assessment on your website. I'll encourage all the leaders, watching. Hey, listen, there's assessment on your website. Just take a look at assessment, go through it, see what you think of it, and then reach out to you for conversation. I think that will definitely open up more doors for opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure, and always happy to connect. And thanks again.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Craig.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Bye, everybody.